Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. Men don't respond to beauty the way you think they do. Beauty might turn heads, but it's words that turn hearts. You want to be unforgettable. You want to be the one he can't shake, even if he's got a whole wife sitting at home. Then you better learn to speak to what no one else is speaking to, his soul. A woman who knows her worth doesn't compete. She sets the standard. That means she doesn't waste her energy trying to outdo another woman, prove her value, or beg for attention. She knows deep down that her presence alone is powerful. When a woman walks in confidence, she doesn't have to ask for a seat at the table. She becomes the table. Men feel that. They notice when a woman isn't chasing validation, when she's not adjusting herself to fit into a man's life like a puzzle piece. She's not a side note or a maybe. She's the main event, and she carries herself like it. See, competition is for those who believe there's scarcity, like there's only one crown and too many heads trying to wear it. But a woman who knows her worth understands there's no need to compete when you are the crown. She doesn't look at the other woman and think, I need to be better than her. She looks at herself and says, I already am enough. That energy, that self-respect, that's what makes a man sit back and evaluate everything. Because most women don't operate that way. Most are out here trying to be chosen, trying to win his attention, trying to prove they're better than the woman he already has. But a woman with worth doesn't play in that arena. She doesn't lower herself to get love. She elevates love to come meet her where she stands. When a man sees that, it throws him off. It challenges him. It makes him realize that what he thought was good enough might have been just easy, not valuable. And that's the shift, because men are not just drawn to beauty. They're drawn to a standard, something that makes them stretch, something that makes them rise. A woman with standards doesn't chase, and that absence of desperation is rare. It's like a breath of fresh air to a man who's used to being catered to, flattered, or pursued. She says, this is what I expect. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. And when he looks at what she's offering, stability, strength, elegance, and peace, it's hard to look away. That doesn't mean she's arrogant. It doesn't mean she's cold. It means she honors herself enough to not be one of many options. She knows she's not for everybody, but for the one who gets it, she'll be everything. And that's what sets her apart. Her value isn't in her ability to convince, it's in her ability to walk away when she's not honored. That alone makes her unforgettable. Because men don't forget the woman who respected herself so deeply that she didn't even try to win them. They remember the woman who stood still and strong while the rest tried to twist and bend themselves into whatever shape he liked. She didn't chase love. She attracted it through her refusal to settle. Speak to his soul, not his ego. That's what makes you unforgettable. See, most women out here are trying to impress a man's surface. They compliment his looks, his money, his status, maybe even his car or his style. That might boost his ego for a minute, but it doesn't last. Ego is temporary. It fades the moment someone else gives him the same praise. But when you speak to a man's soul, when you reach into the part of him that no one else sees or nurtures, that's when you leave a mark that doesn't fade. Every man has a place inside him that's rarely touched. It's the part that feels unseen, unappreciated, or misunderstood. It's hidden behind the image he shows the world, behind the smile, the suits, the confidence. And most people don't even notice that space, let alone speak into it. So when a woman comes along who doesn't just see the man, but sees the man behind the mask, she becomes something he can't shake. She becomes the one who saw his truth and didn't flinch. Speaking to a man's soul is about connection, not performance. It's about saying things that matter. It's about asking the kind of questions that make him pause. Not, what do you do? But what drives you? Not, where do you see yourself in 5 years? But what scares you about not getting there? That kind of conversation doesn't just entertain, it awakens. And when a man is awakened by a woman, he doesn't just remember her, he feels changed by her. Women who speak to the ego might win a night. They might even win a few months. But a woman who speaks to the soul, she lingers, she haunts in the best way. She lives in the quiet moments when he's alone with his thoughts. She echoes in his mind when he wonders if anyone really knows him. Because she did. She knew how to say things that weren't just pretty. They were healing. They were real. They were rare. And the secret is, it doesn't take big words or dramatic statements. Sometimes it's just the tone in your voice when you say, I see you. Sometimes it's the way you hold space for him to talk without fixing or judging. Sometimes it's the way you remember the little details he told you in passing, the things no one else listens to. That's soul-level attention. And soul-level attention is addictive to a man who's starving for depth. The truth is, any woman can feed a man's pride, but it takes a certain kind of woman to feed his spirit. That's the woman he comes back to in his mind, even if he's moved on. That's the one he compares every other woman to, even if he tries to forget her. Because once you've been seen in a way that touches your soul, everything else feels shallow. Everything else feels like noise. And the woman who gave you that silence, the kind that heals, not hides, is the woman you never truly let go of. Confidence in your boundaries is more attractive than any outfit. You can have the perfect dress, flawless makeup, and every curve in place, but if you don't walk with self-respect and firm limits, none of it really matters. A woman who has boundaries is a woman who values herself, and that value doesn't just sit quietly. It speaks without words. It enters the room before she does and demands attention without trying. Because when a woman knows what she will and will not tolerate, it changes how people treat her, and more importantly, how they remember her. Boundaries aren't about being cold or distant. They're not about being rude or dismissive. Boundaries are about clarity. A woman with boundaries makes it clear that she knows who she is, what she deserves, and what she will never settle for. That kind of clarity is rare. Most people are out here trying to please, trying to fit in, trying to keep the peace. But when a woman stands in her truth and says, this is where I draw the line, that's power. And real men respect power. They may test it, they may even challenge it, but deep down, they're drawn to it. A man doesn't want someone who just agrees with everything he says or goes along with whatever he wants. That might be convenient, but it's not attractive. What captures a man's attention is a woman who isn't afraid to say no. A woman who can say, that doesn't work for me, without fear of losing him. A woman who can walk away when something isn't right instead of compromising herself just to keep someone around. That's a woman who becomes unforgettable because she respects herself more than she fears being alone. And it's not just about romantic boundaries. It's about emotional boundaries too. A woman who doesn't allow someone to play with her time, her energy, or her heart. A woman who doesn't get pulled into drama, who doesn't allow manipulation, and who doesn't entertain inconsistency. She doesn't chase clarity, she demands it. She doesn't settle for maybe, she waits for definitely. That energy shifts the whole dynamic of any relationship because she's not coming from a place of desperation. She's coming from a place of abundance, knowing that whatever is meant for her won't require her to shrink. And here's the thing men notice. Even if they don't say it, they feel it. They feel the difference between a woman who's available to anything and a woman who is intentional about everything. The woman with boundaries isn't just another option. She becomes the standard. She sets the tone for how she's treated, and that tone is unforgettable. Not because she was loud or flashy, but because she made it clear, love me with respect, or don't love me at all. That confidence can't be faked, and it can't be ignored. If he has to choose, make it clear you won't wait in line. A woman who knows her value doesn't stand there hoping to be picked like she's in some emotional competition. She doesn't sit quietly in the background while a man goes back and forth, trying to decide whether he wants to commit or keep her as a maybe. She doesn't compete with another woman, and she doesn't wait for someone to figure out what should be obvious, because being an option to someone who isn't sure is the quickest way to lose yourself in someone else's confusion. There's a strength in walking away from a situation where you're not a priority. That strength doesn't come from bitterness or anger. It comes from clarity. When a man is caught between you and someone else, whether it's his wife, his ex, or just another woman he's entertaining, and you still stay hoping he'll pick you, you're telling him exactly how little you think you're worth. You're silently agreeing to play second. But when you look him in the eye and say, I don't wait to be chosen, I choose myself, that changes everything. Not just for him, but for you. Because men are used to women holding on. They're used to women tolerating the end between the excuses, the delays. They expect that as long as they give just enough attention, affection, just enough promises, you'll stay. But when you don't, when you say, I'm not standing here while you figure it out. It forces him to step up or step aside. It takes the power out of his hands and puts it back where it belongs, with you. This isn't about making ultimatums. It's about recognizing when someone's indecision is actually a decision. If he really saw your worth, there wouldn't be a need for a choice. He would already know. The hesitation, the back and forth, the silence, it all says something. And if you ignore it, you're not giving him more time, you're giving him more control. You're allowing yourself to be treated like a backup plan, not a blessing. A woman who values herself doesn't entertain confusion. She doesn't sit on the shelf waiting to be taken down when it's convenient. She keeps walking. And in that walk, in that confidence, in that refusal to wait, she becomes unforgettable. She becomes the one he thinks about when he realizes he made the wrong choice. She becomes the one who had the strength to say, I'm not for sale to the highest bidder. I'm for the one who already knows. You don't need to prove you're better than anyone. You don't need to outshine another woman or make your case. The moment you stand firm and let him know you won't wait around while he entertains others, you've already won. Because that decision isn't just about him. It's about you choosing not to be an accessory to someone else's indecision. Don't ask to be chosen. Be so powerful he questions what he settled for. The moment you stop seeking validation from a man and start owning your presence, everything shifts. There's a difference between wanting to be loved and begging to be noticed. When a woman is in her power, she doesn't need to be loud. She doesn't need to be flashy. And she definitely doesn't need to chase. She just is. And that kind of woman makes a man pause. Not because she's trying to take someone else's place, but because she makes him realize how far below his potential he's been living. Most men aren't used to that kind of woman. They're used to women adjusting themselves, shrinking to fit in, molding into what they think he wants. But a woman in power doesn't bend like that. She holds her head high, carries herself like a queen, and operates with a sense of peace that makes Charles feel uncomfortable. She doesn't beg for space in his life. She has her own life. She doesn't try to be better than the one he's with. She simply becomes the woman he can't stop thinking about because she represents what he didn't even know he needed. There's something magnetic about someone who walks in full alignment with their worth. You feel it before they speak. It's not arrogance. It's not attitude. It's awareness. She knows who she is, and she knows what she brings to the table. That's what makes a man look at the life he's built, the choices he's made, and wonder if he played it safe instead of choosing the real thing. It's not about her looks, her body, or her charm. It's about the way she doesn't ask to be chosen. She knows she already is by the universe, by God, by her own self. When you live in that space, you stop waiting for someone to notice you. You stop putting yourself in such situations where you're hoping to be picked. You start attracting everything that aligns with your standard and everything that doesn't either rises to meet you or falls away. That's what makes a man think twice. That's what stays on his mind long after you've walked away. Because when he looks at what he has and compares it to what he felt with you, the ease, the depth, the challenge, the calm, he starts to feel the gap. You don't need to announce your value. You don't need to put down another woman. Your power lies in what you don't do. You don't chase. You don't settle. You don't perform. You just keep showing up as the most authentic version of yourself. That's what makes you unforgettable. That's what makes a man reconsider everything he thought he wanted. Not because you tried to take something from him, but because you reminded him of everything he's missing by staying where it's safe instead of stepping into something real. Your silence after truth hits louder than begging ever will. There comes a point when words stop carrying the weight they used to. You can explain, you can plead, you can try to make someone understand. But if they're not ready to hear you, all that talking becomes noise. Silence, though, that's different. Silence is powerful because it forces the other person to face their own thoughts. It's not empty. It's full of everything you chose not to say. It lingers in the room long after you've walked out. And when it follows a moment of truth, it doesn't just make a point. It leaves a scar. When a woman speaks her truth clearly and confidently, she doesn't need to repeat herself. She doesn't need to yell, cry, or convince. She just lays it down calmly and honestly, and then she goes quiet. That quiet isn't weakness. It's the strength of someone who's done explaining herself. It's the strength of someone who knows the difference between heard and being valued. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. Men hear that silence differently than they hear your words. Words can be brushed off. Silence gets under their skin. It makes them wonder. It makes them uncomfortable. It forces them to sit with the weight of what you said without distraction. And it's in that silence that they begin to reflect. They begin to replay the last conversation. They think about how you looked when you said what you said. They remember the tone in your voice, the way your energy changed, the way your eyes didn't ask. They declared. And here's the truth: silence after a moment of honesty shows self-respect. It shows emotional discipline. It says, I said what I needed to say, and now the next move isn't mine, it's yours. That's a position of power, not control, not manipulation, but clarity. You're not trying to win anymore. You're just standing in your truth and letting everything else fall into place. That's rare. Most people talk too much when they're afraid. But when you're at peace with what you said, you don't feel the need to fill the space. That kind of silence drives a man crazy in the best way. Not because you're playing games, but because he realizes the game is over. He realizes there's no more chances to fix it with shallow promises. He realizes you're not bluffing. And the stillness that follows truth becomes a mirror. It shows him who he really is and what he's really risking, because you're no longer giving him the comfort of your presence without the commitment of his effort. When a woman masters the art of silence, especially after telling the truth, she becomes unforgettable. She becomes the one he thinks about when the noise of his life fades and the echoes of what she said come rushing back. Because the truth without apology, followed by silence without fear, is something most men never forget. Real power is walking away with grace, not staying to prove a point. There's a strength in choosing silence over drama, distance over desperation, and peace over proving you're right. It's easy to stay and argue, to try and make someone see your worth, to demand attention or clarity from someone who already showed you who they are. But there's nothing powerful about forcing yourself to stay where love is conditional, respect is optional, or attention has to be earned through struggle. The moment you decide to leave with your head held high, without making a scene, you take back control of your story. Walking away doesn't mean you lost. It means you're done participating in something that costs more than it gives. It means you've chosen self, respect over temporary validation. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Staying to prove a point often comes from a place of fear, the fear of being forgotten, replaced, or misunderstood. But a woman who knows her value doesn't need to be understood by someone who never tried to know her in the first place. She doesn't need to explain why she won't settle. She lets her absence speak for itself. Grace isn't about being passive. It's about power that doesn't need to shout. It's in the way you exit a situation without bitterness, without revenge, without burning bridges to prove how hurt you are. Because you know your peace is more valuable than any apology you were never going to get. A graceful exit is the kind of move leaves a lasting impression. It's not loud, but it's unforgettable because the person on the other side expected a reaction. And when they don't get it, they feel the weight of your silence more than they ever felt the sound of your voice. Men remember the woman who left with grace, the one who didn't play games, who didn't lower her standards, who didn't wait for him to figure it out. They remember her because she didn't need closure to move on. She didn't need his permission to heal. She knew that her growth didn't require his participation. That kind of strength is rare. It's rare because it requires emotional maturity. It requires you to put your ego aside and choose peace over proving you're right. The world teaches women to fight for love, to hold on no matter what, wait until he changes or sees the light. But real love doesn't require suffering. And real strength isn't shown by how long you endure. It's shown by how boldly you walk away when your soul is no longer being fed. There's something so powerful about a woman who says nothing, who doesn't explain herself, who simply walks away with her dignity intact. Not to make him miss her, not to get attention, but because she finally realized she doesn't belong where she's not seen, not valued, not cherished,